All right, so we're a month into the season. We're starting to get a little bit of see where people are at. We're finally getting to see a good enough sample size of what we think of each team. Where we want to put each team this year. So, next week we got some good games. We got Louisville, NC State. Both teams are ranked now. Both teams are 4-1. Louisville is the favorite on the road against NC State. To me, it's tough picking against Lamar Jackson. It's very tough. I love picking Lamar Jackson. I usually think, okay, Lamar Jackson's going to get it done. I'd rather just pick Lamar Jackson. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But you don't ever want to get beat by Lamar. You don't ever want Lamar to make you look stupid. But I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to let Lamar make me look stupid this week. I'm going with NC State. I like their quarterback. I like Finley. I like his weapons. Stephen Lewis is a good wide receiver. He's got his little tight end, little flex guy that he runs sometimes, Jalen Samuel. Very underrated, very hard to cover. I think Louisville's defense is going to have a lot of trouble with him. And then their running back's really not bad. I think his name is Hines. Let me make sure of that. Don't want to be wrong here. Yeah, Hines. Nigel Hines, I think it is. He's had a pretty good year. All right, we got Ole Miss, Auburn. I think Auburn will definitely handle this game. Got an early SEC tip-off at 11 on Saturday. That Louisville-NC State game's on Thursday. So on Saturday, you got Ole Miss, Auburn. I'll take Auburn for sure. We got Georgia and Vandy. I'll take Georgia for sure. OU, Iowa State. I'll definitely take Oklahoma for sure in that one. And then as we go down the list, we've got who is that? Penn State Northwestern. We got Penn State Northwestern. Penn State on the road. Northwestern didn't play terrible last week, but they just don't got it. They just don't look like a team that's got it. I'll definitely take Penn State to win on the road. Wake Forest, Clemson. Wake Forest played pretty good. I don't think Florida State's very good, though. I think that game showed more about how good Florida State is more than how good Wake Forest was. I think Clemson will definitely slaughter Wake Forest this week. As we go down the list, Duke, Virginia, both these teams are one-loss teams. Virginia is actually favorited at home by 2. I'll take Duke. I like their quarterback. Pitt, Syracuse. I think this will be a good game between some good quarterbacks. Max Brown versus Eric Dungy. Watch these wide receivers out here at Syracuse. I said watch them last week. Irvin Phillips had like 17 catches for 180 yards and a TD. Then the other guy, Steven Ishmael, another good wide receiver. Got some very good wide receivers over here at Syracuse. As we go down our list, LSU, Florida. This is a game that's probably game of the week type last year or in the years past. But I just don't feel it this year. Florida has struggled. They don't have those 10 guys that are out. They've been impressive to me the way that they've won without those guys. Their quarterback situation is terrible. Malik Zaire transfers there. They go ahead and start Felipe Franks. Felipe Franks shows that he's really not that ready. He's a good talent, but he's just not ready. Luke Del Rio comes in, saves them against Kentucky. Comes in and plays this week and injures his shoulder and is out for the year. And so, LSU's looked terrible the last 2 weeks. I wasn't really happy when they fired Les Miles. I thought that was one of the stupidest things they could have done. Let's talk about that for a minute. LSU, you're 10-2 every year. Yeah, you lose to Alabama and you may lose one more game to Auburn or some other pretty good SEC team. Was it really worth getting this Ed Oregon guy in here who looks like he'd be a pretty good defensive coordinator but doesn't look like anything like a head coach? Do you really think that was a good idea? No. We still don't have a quarterback. You still don't have a quarterback. Etling has looked terrible. This is one of those games it's like we can try to get excited for it, but it's kind of hard. LSU's look terrible. Florida doesn't look like a top team. So you're talking about two of like SEC powerhouse teams that are middle of the road teams. So I'm not excited about this game this week. I'm definitely going to take Florida at home. I don't like what I've seen out of LSU. Now they hadn't had Geis the last 2 weeks, but still it hadn't mattered if it's Geis, if it's Fournette, if it's Williams. It hadn't mattered who it is. They usually run the ball well. They're not running the ball well. They lost to Mississippi State. And, we put Mississippi State in the top 25, and we made it that Mississippi State was a good team. And then look what they did against Auburn. They got slaughtered. Look what Auburn did against Clemson. Auburn barely lost to Clemson. That was a close-ass, good-ass game. That game made me feel as if Clemson wasn't that great because I was like, well, Auburn's all right, but now look at Clemson. Clemson's looked at as one of the top teams, and they barely were able to get past Auburn. So we'll see how that moves forward. big game of the week. I really like this game. West Virginia, TCU. Now, I think TCU is a little higher in the rankings than they should be, but it's obviously because they beat Oklahoma State. They are undefeated. They're 4-1. They're a very old team, a very veteran team. The first of the year, I thought this team was going to be bad. I said they're going to be 7-5, 8-4. But then I started looking at their roster, and I saw, man, they've got a lot of old players on their team, got a lot of talent coming back on the defensive side of the ball. And then I was like, Kenny Hill, if Kenny Hill can just fucking execute, he's got the weapons around him. So this is a team. They're at home this week. They're projected to win by 14 over West Virginia. I think West Virginia is going to give them hell, though. Will Grier is a damn good quarterback. He's got weapons around him just as well. I would say TCU is going to win this game, but West Virginia is going to give them hell. Notre Dame, North Carolina. I think Notre Dame for sure will win. Air Force, Navy, love this game. It's going to be one of the quickest games. They both run the option. This game will probably be over in like 3 hours. Air Force is 1-3, but they played some tough teams, and the Navy's 4-0. I'll definitely take Navy to win. Minnesota, Purdue. Purdue's 2-2. Losses to Louisville and Michigan, so losses to ranked teams. Minnesota really didn't look that impressive against Maryland last week. They were at home against Maryland. It seemed like them and Maryland just kind of had a dogfight of two mediocre Big Ten teams, and I think Purdue's going to win this week. Purdue's going to be at home. They're going to have a lot of energy. They're going to want to win that game for Tiller, who just passed away, their old coach. I'll take Purdue. Miami, Florida State. This is a game that's usually a top game, a big game, just like the LSU-Florida game, and it's not this year. Florida State looks atrocious. They are terrible. Injuries have destroyed Florida State. Now don't get me wrong, Florida State was a very good team at the first of the year. They were one of the top teams in the league. I thought they were better than Clemson going into this year, but with losing Francois, with the losses of their offensive linemen, the fact that they literally can only run the ball, they've got good running backs, but they literally can only run the ball. I'll definitely take Miami on the road in this game. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Malik Rozier can handle it. Mark Walton, I think, will handle it. I think they'll do fine. Arkansas, South Carolina, this is a pretty good game. Arkansas is actually favored to win on the road. I'll take South Carolina at home. I think they're going to bounce back again after the loss to A&M. I wouldn't be surprised if Arkansas does beat them, though. South Carolina, it does not have Debo Sanders still. Maryland and Ohio State. I'll take Ohio State for sure. Maryland has looked impressive at times this year. They beat Texas, they beat Minnesota, and they did get destroyed by UCF. But I'll take Ohio State for sure in this game. That's obviously a no-brainer, but I don't see any upsets happening there. And then as we move down our list of games, Kansas State, Texas. As a Big 12 boy, I like this game. Kansas State against Texas. Texas at home. Texas is favored to win. I'll take Kansas State on the road. Their defense and their special teams is going to get it done. Texas defense is going to play really well. It'll probably be a real low-scoring game. Texas defense is going to play well, but see, the thing about Kansas State doesn't really turn the ball over. They play safe. They run the ball a lot, and I don't think Texas' offense is going to do a whole lot. They scored 17 points against Iowa State, so I'm not real sold on Texas. I don't like Shane Boucher at the quarterback position. I like Ellinger better there. I'll take Kansas State. Their special teams is 10 times better probably than Texas. Let's go Kansas State. And then SMU, Houston. This is just a Texas game that I wanted to put on here. SMU is 4-1. Their only loss is to TCU, which they played TCU pretty well in the first half. Houston, their only loss is to Texas Tech. Houston's projected to win by 5.5. I'll take Houston in this one for sure. But I think SMU is going to play them pretty good. They got two pretty good receivers. Cortland Sutton, and then this kid named Trey Quinn has came out of nowhere. He had a huge last two games. He's had some huge games for SMU. Watch them too. And then as you go down the list, Alabama, A&M. Let's talk about A&M for a minute. A&M should be 5-0 on the year. They should be a ranked team. There should be a lot of hype going into this game. I really wish there was, because then they'd get to this game against Alabama and they'd get fucking destroyed. They're already supposed to lose by 26. I will say that A&M has been very resilient. Their defense has played very well. Kellen Mond will be a good quarterback. He's getting great experience this year. Their running backs are pretty good. They got some pretty good wide receivers. Christian Kirk's good. Good prospects. It's ridiculous that they're 4-1. A close comeback win against South Carolina. Another comeback win against Arkansas. And then to think that their only losses to UCLA, which they lost real late. They should be a 5-0 team right now. And my thing is this team has dealt with injuries at their quarterback position. They should not be a 4-1 team. They should not be a 5-0 team. They're 4-1, but they shouldn't be where they're at. So I'm surprised where A&M's at. What's his name? Someone's on the hot seat, but he's actually coaching pretty well at this point. If anything, the reason they want to get him out there is because they just want to get that Chavis guy in there. They're constantly showing Chavis, oh, he's the defensive coordinator, assistant head coach. They just want him to be the head coach. That's just the bottom line. It doesn't matter if someone coaches bad or doesn't. They are hoping that someone coaches bad because they really want a reason to bring Chavis in. Let's go down the list. Missouri, Kentucky. Missouri's been awful this year. Missouri was a team I thought could be pretty good in the East of the SEC, and Kentucky's actually looked a little bit better. Kentucky has close games against everybody, though. They don't really break away from anybody, so watch that. But I'll take Kentucky at home. Michigan State, Michigan, I'm really disappointed that this is somewhat game of the week type, this is the game of the week. I think Michigan State, they're trying to hype it, but Michigan State is terrible. They did beat Iowa last week. That made them look a little bit better, but that was a home game. They got destroyed against Notre Dame, slaughtered against Notre Dame, Michigan State's a team that has been good in the past. Don't get me wrong. Very good coach, very good system, good defense. And Michigan's not going to blow them out of the water. No, Michigan's not going to score tons of points. But Michigan's definitely going to win this game. This isn't a primetime game. You know what I'm saying? Arizona, Colorado, we got this one on here. I'll take Colorado for sure over Arizona. Could be a pretty close game, though. I wouldn't be surprised if Dawkins plays pretty good for Arizona, but I will take Colorado at home. Colorado should have got a win last week against UCLA. They screwed around and lost to Rosen. Frozen Rosen just about give a game to about anybody. Let anybody stay in a game. But I shouldn't say Frozen Rosen. I wanted just to say that, but it's really UCLA's defense that's just terrible. I don't know how Colorado lost last week. Washington State, Oregon. This is a game that is a game that's okay, Oregon's favorited. Now Herbert went out last week. Royce Freeman went out last week. So we'll see what happens with the quarterback and running back position there for Oregon. I don't like how Oregon's played the last couple of weeks. I'm going to go Washington State on the road. After that win, the one thing I will say, Washington State has not played any road games this year. It's going to be a close game. They're going to fuck around and it's going to be close, but I'll take Washington State. I don't look at Washington State as a team to just come in and throw the playoff off or a team that can be in the playoff. I don't look at them that way. So we'll see how long this little road will go for them. Wisconsin, Nebraska. Nebraska's going to want to knock them off. This sounds crazy, but Nebraska's probably one of the tougher games on Wisconsin's schedule this year. That's how easy it is. Their toughest game on the schedule is Michigan. So we'll see what happens with Wisconsin this year. But I think they'll win against Nebraska. But, if Wisconsin starts slow, it's tough for them to get going. It's not hard for them to get going per se, talking about last week, but, if you keep a team in a game for long enough, it could get scary, and I think Wisconsin's going to fuck around and do that once or two times this year. UCF, Cincinnati, I'll take UCF for sure. UCF is in the top 25. I hadn't put them in my top 25 power poll yet. You're going to have to get a couple more wins than Memphis and Maryland for me to get you in there. But they're 25 on the list, and they hadn't looked bad this year. I thought Memphis would beat them, and they blew Memphis out of the water. So kudos to them. McKenzie Milton's looked like a pretty good quarterback. He's got weapons around him that look pretty good. Real good defense. The Griffin, the guy with one hand, very good player. I really like him. I really hope that someone gives him a chance in the NFL. Stanford versus Utah. This is going to be a big game. We'll see what's going on with Utah at the quarterback position. Hundley did injure himself 2 weeks ago. They did have a bye week this last week, so good for them. Stanford looked very strong against Arizona State. Now, Arizona State has a very bad defense, so let's not get crazy now. But Stanford did look very good against Arizona State. Now, their defense gave up 24 points. It was a close game. Utah's defense is going to be a lot better in this game. I'm actually going to go out and I'm going to say Stanford's going to win the game, though. I think Stanford can go in and win the game. And Utah made me look stupid and destroy Stanford and show them, they're not no good if they're not playing nobody without a defense. And I know Utah is going to bring a defense, so we'll see what happens. A couple other games, we'll go Cal Washington. I'll take Washington for sure. Like I've been saying, though, I've been very impressed with Cal this year. They didn't play so hot against Oregon, but Oregon with the injuries Oregon had, it gave them a chance to get back in. So let's talk about last week a little bit now. Texas, Iowa State. This is a boring-ass game. Texas won. Iowa State showed no resistance at all. This was a bad game in the eyes of a Texas guy because you're like, dang, like we played Iowa State. We should have won 34-7, and we barely won. This game could have been a lot closer than it was. We talked about Miami-Duke. Miami blew Duke out of the water. Duke just didn't come to play. Kind of what I expected. Duke was 4-0, but who had they played? And then Washington State, USC. This was probably one of the games of the week. Really liked it. Really good game. Washington State was able to come out on top. Sam Darnold's had some issues with interceptions this year, but he did like I said, when the game is on the line, he went down the field and he got the TD that the team needed to get the game back close, get it tied. And I think if he would have had 2 more minutes, he might have been able to do something else with the ball, but he just didn't have any time. Washington State had the ball last. Washington State wins. Luke Falk looked awesome. He just managed the game real well. Just picked the USC defense apart. I'm glad USC finally got a loss. They've looked bad all year. And they finally, got a loss of a deserving loss. They've played against, they've played bad all year. Honestly, Western Michigan game was bad. Texas game was bad. They didn't necessarily play bad in this game, but it's funny how they barely beat Washington State, but they still want to boost Washington State into the top 10. But I don't feel like Washington State's in the top 10 yet. They're going to lose a game on the road, most likely. Florida Vanderbilt, I said, they lost Del Rio, but they played Vanderbilt pretty well. They won the game. Vanderbilt did play better than they did against Alabama, but typical what we saw. I talked about the Maryland-Minnesota game. Maryland was able to come out on top. Wisconsin jumped on Northwestern in the second half. Georgia-Texas team we're going to put our eye on coming forward. The ACC play, they played really well. Their only loss is to Tennessee, and they lost that on a 2-point conversion. They could be a 5-0 team right now. USF had a game against Eastern Carolina. It was a close game in the first half. Blew them out in the second half. USF should be getting some tougher opponents in the next couple of weeks. We'll see how that goes. NC State, Syracuse. NC State was able to handle Syracuse. They went up pretty early. They're up 26-7. For a good part of this game. Now, Georgia blew Tennessee straight out of the water. Thought it was hilarious how the broadcast started with a Butch Jones talking to the media about how he needs the negativity out of it or whatever, and they got blown out 41-0. His team looked terrible. His team looked like they weren't ready to play. I think they threw a pick on the first play of the game. They had fumbles throughout the game. When Georgia gave them the ball on their side of the field, they had another fumble. So Tennessee looked terrible. I wouldn't be surprised if Butch Jones is out before we know it. Kansas State and Baylor. Kansas State kind of let Baylor get back into this in the second half, and I think it's not more about the Kansas State's not that good or, Kansas State's just a middle-of-the-road team. I think it's the fact that Baylor's been in all their games this year. Baylor is 0-5, but I think Baylor is improving throughout. And then Penn State destroyed Indiana. Florida State barely beat Wake Forest. It's honestly a pretty good game. Back and forth throughout the day. Florida State couldn't do anything offensively. They were able to run the ball, though. Navy was down 14-0 against Tulsa. I was getting a little nervous, but then they were able to score 31 in a row and get back on top and beat Tulsa. Like I said, Stanford beat Arizona State, ran all over. Michigan State, Iowa, this was a boring-ass game. Michigan State was up 14-0 and then 17-7 most of the game. Iowa got the game close at the end to make it look, respectable, but Michigan State was able to win the game. Like I said, Auburn destroyed Mississippi State. Not even close. Mississippi State's not a ranked team. Just because you beat LSU don't mean you're a ranked team. Get it right. Troy beat LSU this week. Troy, I think his name is Jordan Chum, ran all over LSU. I seen teams, play good for a half on these Power 5 schools, but I don't see them fucking beat them often. And LSU dug themselves such a big hole that they couldn't even come back. Was down 24-7 at one point, lost 24-21. I'm glad they lost though because they were just creeping in my power 25, and now I can just drop them off. I don't even care about them no more. And they're a team that I was honestly pretty high on in the first year. Thought they could be up there with Auburn and Alabama. But, what happens when you get rid of Les Miles? So then let's keep going. we're almost done. Memphis, UCF, talked about that. A&M was able to come back in South Carolina. They're so resilient. Really, really impressed with A&M this year. Armani Watts. Ohio State handled 56-0 over Rutgers. Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. So Texas Tech actually surprised some people in this game, but I think it was more about the fact that Oklahoma State missing field goals, a pick six in the red zone at the first of the game. I think Oklahoma State could have really busted this game open, made it a little bit tougher on Texas Tech, but they let Texas Tech stay in the whole game. They continue to miss field goals throughout. I'm talking short field goals. Maybe if the offense could have just finished, this could have been like a 56-34 game instead of 41-34. Mason Rudolph is climbing up my draft board as a quarterback. I really like him. He just looks like a leader. He looks like, he makes all the throws. If I'm an NFL prospect, I'm wondering, why would you not want Mason Rudolph? This dude looks like a stud. He is what keeps Oklahoma State ticking. He is what keeps them going week to week, and he's going to be that guy week to week. And you saw when they're against TCU, he struggled. He didn't play that good. Against Tech, he played really good. He was the guy against Tech. So we'll see what goes on with Mason Rudolph going forward. Washington was able to beat Oregon State. They're only up like 7-0 at half. I kind of got a little nervous for them there, but they were able to win 42-7. Alabama destroyed Ole Miss. Great to see that. Clemson, Virginia Tech. This was a game that I thought would be better, but Clemson was able to just jump on them early. Virginia Tech couldn't get anything going against Clemson's defense. I expected Virginia Tech's defense to be able to hold Clemson a little bit more of accountable on the offense end, which didn't happen. And then Clemson, just jumps on them throughout the game, and then eventually, it's a blowout. So that was tough, but I think Virginia Tech will grow from it. I think Virginia Tech has a very good chance to be able to play Clemson again in the ACC championship game, so we'll see what happens there. But they had it all in their favor. They had them in Blacksburg. I thought this was a game that they could win, and they let it go. Oregon handled Cal. This was a game that was close. It wasn't ever close, I guess you'd say. They were up 17-0 for most of the first half. Then Cal started to score a little bit, and then Oregon was able to get rolling again, and they won 45-24. San Diego State barely beat Northern Illinois, so they stay undefeated to continue their hope to get an undefeated season over there at San Diego State. And then UCLA and Colorado. This was honestly a pretty good game. Colorado, big key in this game. Some of the announcers couldn't get it off their mind in the second half. Colorado went for a fake field goal right before the second half, right before the end of the first half, and they didn't get it. And so that would have been 3 more points that they had. They lost the game 27-23. They would have. It would have just been a little bit harder. They would have lost the game by 1 instead. But at the same time, you say, well, maybe if they would have had it, they did have the ball. They had to throw a Hail Mary, so they did get to like the 45 on the other side. They had 8 seconds or so. They could have thrown another short pass, kicked another field goal, and won the game by 2 instead of losing it by 4. Saying if they would have made that field goal before the half ended. So, tough game for Colorado. It would have been a good one to win for them. They would have been right in the thick of the Pac-12, I don't know if they're the North or the South or whatever the hell they call it over there. But their side, and I know their side. It's Colorado, it's UCLA, it's USC, it's Utah, and then they've got 2 more teams in it, Arizona State. So those are the teams in it. But, looking forward, it's a tough game for Colorado. It gets UCLA back in it. It helps USC with their loss. It doesn't hurt them as bad. And then Utah, if Utah can get a win against Stanford this week, they're looking like they're at the top. And now, not that they're the most maybe the scariest team or the most impressive team in the Pac-12, but they're a team that's solid. They win. They get 9 to 10 wins each year out of that, and they're really hard to play at. I'm second guessing my Stanford selection to beat Utah because the way Utah is at home, they're very tough. I'll stick with Stanford though.